We are scheduled to have an in-camera session. When we do, we'll go in camera like usual, and Heather will declare an oath of privacy, and we'll make sure that there's no one else in the room with you when we get to the camera part of the meeting. Any other questions to the format for tonight? Seeing none, we'll go to item number 1, attendance. I'll take attendance. Please just respond to your name. Councillor Wheat.
Present.
Councillor McAlpine.
Present.
Councillor Ferrier.
Present.
Councillor House.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Pierce.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
Here.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Here.
Councillor Gatward.
Present.
Thank you. Number 2 on the agenda, the approval of the agenda. Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gatward that the agenda for the County of Brant Special Council meeting of August 4th, 2020 be approved.
Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of accepting the agenda the way it stands? Thank you. Number 3, declaration of pecuniary interests. Anyone have any? If you do, please come out with them now. Moving on then right to number 4, Planning Act. First what we have is a, well, we have many presentations tonight, but we're going to turn it over to Matt Vaughn at this point. Matt, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Tonight we'll be hearing from our planning staff regarding 3 forms of reports. The first, Planning Act applications, initial public meeting presentations. We'll focus on new planning applications that have been received and are being presented to council with the intent to provide information about and receive public input on the application. The second, which is Planning Act applications, statutory public hearings. We'll focus on planning reports with staff recommendations for applications that have either been presented to council before as information or are exempt from the initial presentation process. The third set of reports will focus on county-initiated planning policy projects and will be received as information seeking support of the associated work plans and timelines. Tonight, there are 2 initial public meeting presentations, 5 statutory public hearings, and 2 policy-related project reports for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any member of council? This is the format. Seeing none, we'll move on to 4A, please. Is there a question? No. Moving on then, please, to number 4A.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that presentations made regarding ZBA 7-20-MD, Huppert and Ruska, 73 and 81 West River Road be received as information.
Number 4A.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that presentations made regarding ZBA 7-20-MD, Huppert and Ruska. I believe some of our newly arrived guests may have a delay. I'm hearing myself twice there. They may need to be muted until it's time for them to present.
I'm hearing myself twice too, and I'm getting quite a delay on Councillor Ferrier. Anyone else having any trouble? Put your hand up. Yeah. Councillor Gatward, you're talking to yourself.
Mayor Bailey, I believe we can proceed. I think there's the staff presentations for each of these, and then we'll proceed to the applicants and any delegations.
That's right. So the first thing we'll do for 4A is we'll call on Dan, please, for the planner, present for this application.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff have received a zoning bylaw amendment application for the properties collectively at 73 and 81 West River Road in Paris. The agents who are present tonight are Rob Important and Bob Phillips from JH Cahoon Engineering. And staff recommendation this evening is that the item be received for information purposes only. So just working through the presentation, the slides that you have a copy of in front of you, the existing conditions. So the abutting properties at 73 and 81 West River Road have a combined frontage of 251 meters, a depth of 100 meters, and a combined area of 2.9 hectares or 7.1 acres. The property at 73 West River Road contains an existing dwelling and associated accessory structures. The property at 81 West River is currently vacant. The official plan identifies the property as an urban residential land use. It's located in the primary urban settlement area of Paris and is also falls within the site-specific policy area 1, which does not really relate to the development, but more so the previous uses being the golf course and the rental facility known as the River House. So as part of staff review, we are reviewing provincial policy. We know that the province has directed the focus of any development within a settlement area to be diverse, efficient, and complete development patterns, coordinated with available water, sanitary, and storm infrastructure. The property also has identified woodlot located towards the rear and is also within a identified archaeological area, which may or may not have significance. The zoning bylaw currently zones the property as residential singles R1, and which requires a minimum lot area of 360 square meters and a minimum of frontage of 11 meters. And these lots, the minimum lot sizes within the residential singles R1 zone is required to be developed on full services. So the proposal, the applicants are requesting to modify the current R1 zone to a special exception R1 zone to permit the development on partial services. You'll see on the slide identified as proposal. I've generated this chart that identifies the comparison between full services as the zoning bylaw requires, and then what the applicants are proposing as partial services. So proposing a minimum lot area of 1,000 square meters and minimum frontage of 20 meters. So the subject lands are abutting a future development well known to you councillors in the committee as the Paris Grand Estates subdivision. We know that this area will be 700 plus units developed on full services. So staff are taking that future development into consideration as we review the application. In terms of next steps, staff will continue to receive comments and review the application and discuss with the applicant and internal staff. And when deemed appropriate, further public notices will be sent out to the appropriate public within 120 meters, notifying them of the next public meeting. As well, staff will prepare a formal recommendation within a formal report and present that to the committee. I'll also note that I did receive one email correspondence. I'm not sure if you have a copy of that in your package or not, with a number of questions just related to the appropriateness of the development being on partial services, appropriateness of the lot sizes proposed, knowing that partial services in this case only includes municipal water, that a septic system would need to be accommodated on any proposed lots, as well as the impact on this development in relation to the Paris Grand subdivision. So at this time, I'll end it there, and I'll ask if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to declare this a public meeting open. Adam, is there anyone here to represent the application that wants to speak?
Mayor Bailey, Rob Van Porten from J.H. Cahoon Engineering is here on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Rob Van Porten. I'm a planner with J.H. Cahoon Engineering Limited. As pointed out by planner Nemizniak, we represent two property owners on the north side of West River Road at the far eastern boundary of Paris. 73 West River Road has an area of approximately 2.4 hectares. has a dwelling located on it and several outbuildings. 81 West River Road, which is the smaller parcel, contains an area of approximately 0.37 hectares and is vacant. I understand that the building or buildings on it were demolished with the aid, I guess, of the fire department as part of their training exercise. The subject property and the general area is designated urban residential and is located on Paris. And as pointed out, the policies of the official plan require that development occur on full municipal services. This area of Paris is served by municipal water, and there is no anticipation in the short or medium or even long term that full municipal service in the form of a sewer system would be located on West River Road. As I said, it's on the far extreme of the municipality, and even with the development of the golf course, it would not be anticipated that services would be extended to these two properties. And I might add the general area, because there's development on the south side of West River Road as well. The subject property is zoned residential single, R1 by the municipal zoning bylaw, which also requires that development occur on full municipal services. The submitted application seeks an exemption to that provision, allowing for future development to occur on partial services only. I provided council with background material contained in both the official plan and zoning bylaw, which is attached to your agenda and may have been sent to you prior to this meeting. But it outlines the development policies, which I believe support the application. Most specifically, I refer to section 5.2.3.2 of the official plan, which clearly states that exemptions may be granted by way of a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for partial services, notwithstanding the overall policy that talks about full service requirement. Also, there's a provision within the zoning bylaw in section 4.2.7, which states that private systems are acceptable if approved by the municipality, primarily the chief building official. Prior to the adoption of the current zoning bylaw, I have to point out that these two properties and the general area were zoned residential type 1B, R1B, which did allow development on partial services, subject to meeting certain development criteria as far as lot sizes are concerned. I attended most if not all of the official plan meetings in 2010 to 2012, which adopted the official plan, and also attended many of the meetings that relate to the adoption of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And the recurring theme in all those meetings was that these two documents would not diminish development standards or development rights. By the rezoning of this application from the current by the previous R1B category, which allowed partial services, to the new category R1, residential singles, which requires full services. This bylaw 61-16, zoning in R1, clearly did precisely what the council of the day determined was not acceptable. In other words, diminish development standards. I have to point out that this rezoning application does not in itself create development. That will have to come, if it comes at all, by further application by way of plan of subdivision or severance. However, the applicants believe it important that the groundwork be set to allow for development in the future. Mr. Chair Mr. Mayor and members, I can respond to questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the representative of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Heather, are there any members of the public that want to speak to the application?
No, there are none at this time.
Thank you. Seeing no questions either way, I will declare this hearing closed, and I will hand it over to Councillor Ferrier.
The motion was already moved with a seconder.
Could you do it again, please?
Oh, sure. We had that technical issue then. Sure. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pierce, that presentations made regarding ZBA 7-20-MD, Hooper and Ruska, 73 and 81 West River Road be received as information.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Everybody's clear on what they're voting for? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Number B, please. 365 Robinson Road. Ryan, the planner, is representing the application.
Mr. Mayor, do you want me to move this at the front end or the back end of this?
The back end, please.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject lands are located on the north side of Robinson Road, east of Cleaver Road in the former township of Burford. The subject lands are approximately 22.23 hectares in size and are surrounded by agricultural uses to the east, north, and west. To the south of the subject lands is a cluster of established residential lots along Robinson Road. The applicant is proposing to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agriculture A to rural residential RR to allow for the future severance of two residential lots. The area to be rezoned is approximately 1.43 hectares in size and is designated in the county's official plan as rural residential. The applicant is proposing lots of approximately 0.7 hectares or 1.72 acres in size with frontage along Robinson Road. The next step for this application will be to receive comments from internal and external agencies, as well as members of the public. A recommendation report is scheduled for September 1st council meeting. Staff is recommending that this presentation be received for information purposes at this time, and I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions to the application? I'll declare first, I'm sorry, the public meeting open. Are there any questions to the application? Is there anyone here to speak to the application or a representative of the applicant, Heather?
Yep, Mr. Van Porten is going to make a presentation on this one as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As pointed out by Planner Cummins, this application seeks to rezone a small portion of an existing property running along Robinson Road from agricultural to rural residential, allowing for the eventual establishment of two residential lots. Each lot will have a frontage of approximately 45 meters and an area of approximately 0.7 hectares, as pointed out by the planner. The remainder of the farm will be zoned continue to be designated agricultural and zoned agricultural, and will be used for that purpose. As pointed out by the planner, the frontage along Robinson Road is designated by the official plan as rural residential, supporting the establishment of the lots as proposed. And as I indicated, the balance of the property will remain in its agricultural function and will not be developed. These two lots would be considered in planning jargon as a rounding out development of the property. Mr. Mayor, that's the bones of our application. We have made application for the severance, awaiting decision on this rezoning. I can respond to questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the representative of the applicant? Seeing none. Heather, are there any members of the public that want to speak to the application?
Mayor Eddy, I believe you had some questions to the applicant. Councillor Gatward had her hand up.
Okay, Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Van Porten. Did you say 45-meter frontages on these lots? And is that larger than a normal rural residential lot?
I did say 40, 45. I think they're between 45 and 47. They're consistent, I believe, with the other lots that were created between Cleaver and ours and the subject property. It's hard to say what normal rural residential lots size is. They generally range between 40 and 60 meters. So it's certainly within the ballpark of what you would normally see.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, are there any members of the public?
No, there are no members of the public this evening.
Okay, hearing none, we'll call this public hearing closed. Councillor Howes?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor LaFerriere that staff report RPT 20-101, update to county zoning bylaw I'm reading the wrong one. Pardon me. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that the presentations made regarding application ZBA 15/20/RC be received as information and referred to staff for consideration as part of the recommendation report.
Thank you. Just for the sake of the clerk, I have Councillor Howes and, I do have Councillor Wheat. Sorry, Madam Clerk, it's correct. Any other questions to the application? Seeing none, everyone's clear on what they're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 5, Planning Act applications. I'm going to turn it over to Matt again, please, for an explanation.
Thanks very much. Tonight, we're considering 5 Planning Act applications with recommendations for approval. The Roswell Concrete, Brookfield Residential, and Flux Brewing Company applications were presented previously for input and information to inform the staff report. The Housekeeping Amendment application was introduced as a policy item at our last meeting. The Ritchie application is exempt from needing an information meeting because it is a temporary use, being a garden suite. Thanks very much.
Thank you. The first one on the agenda is the Roswell Concrete. I'll declare the public meeting open and I'll ask the clerk, is there anyone to represent the Roswells?
I believe
Shouldn't the
Mr.
planner
Vaughn has
present
the,
first?
yeah, Mr. Vaughn has the planner's presentation first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. The subject zoning bylaw amendment application for Roswell Concrete was originally scheduled to be heard June 2nd council meeting. The application was deferred to allow the applicant to engage the surrounding community to address a number of concerns that were raised in regards to the operation of the facility. A special virtual public information session was facilitated by the applicant on June 29th. The list of concerns raised through this circulation and virtual public information session were predominantly related to noise, dust, traffic, and impact on the water table in this area. In this regard, staff is of the opinion that the special provisions included in the rezoning and the site plan control application that has been submitted, which is currently under review, will be able to mediate these concerns. Also, as an act of goodwill, the applicant has recently submitted an amendment to their application requesting that the proposed use be changed from a concrete batching plant to a facility for the manufacture and fabricating of precast concrete products. This amendment will help clarify that the proposal does not include the manufacturing of concrete, but rather the shaping of concrete into various products. Staff will be working closely with the applicant through the site plan process to ensure that it is a safe and appealing site that will be developed. In relation to the policy review, the proposal is in keeping with the policies of the Planning Act and meets the criteria for an amendment to the zoning bylaw. The proposal is consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement, and it conforms to the policies of the growth plan and with the County of Brant official plan. Staff consider the proposal to be good planning and therefore recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to declare this public meeting open, and I see that Mr. Roswell is here. You're going to speak to, you have anything to tell us?
Nope.
No? Any questions, Mr. Roswell? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm not sure if this is to Mr. Roswell or not, but I'm trying to understand when we're talking about, it talks about in the conclusions and recommendations, page 8, I believe, of the report, when it talks about the buffer that's going to be put along the north side of the building, and then it states because of that buffer, there's a reduction in the frontage of the building. Now, my understanding here is this building, the front of this building is going to face Bishopsgate Road, which I believe is to the west. First of all, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. So if we're putting a buffer along the north side of the building, which would in essence be the side of the building, I'm trying to understand how that affects the frontage.
That would be for Cahoon's.
Mayor Bailey, Mr. Van Porten is also here for this application as the agent's representative.
All right. Would you like to speak to that question, please?
I will absolutely speak to that question. It was the intent to allow the buffer or provide for the buffer along the northern property boundary from the adjacent to the open storage area. It is not the intent to buffer the building, but merely buffer the activities of the storage area, which is located at the back of the building.
Right.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Does that clarify that question?
No, sorry, and I appreciate that. It does state in there from the area that the storage area, which I can see is in the back of the building. So that's why I'm trying to understand that why something to the north of the building, which technically is the side of the building, would cause for a reduction in the frontage of the building.
I don't know that. I know there is a buffer. Obviously, there's ability to provide some buffer at the front of the building along Bishopsgate, adjacent to the parking lot. It was not our intent to extend the buffer area, the 4.5 meter buffer area, beyond the open storage area. So if that is what's confusion, that is not the intent.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, if I could, so just for clarification, I'm looking at the paragraph under conclusions and recommendations, which is at the bottom of page 8 of 12 of that report. And it talks about the outdoor storage being located behind the front of the building. That's fine. And it talks about the buffer. And then it talks of, because of the outdoor buffer, to reduce the front yard setback 20 meters. And again, I'm just trying to understand why something being put on the north side of the building would affect the frontage when the frontage is to the west.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor. Bob Phillips from Cahoon Engineering, and maybe I can clarify this item. Basically, the front yard setback was established to create sort of a streetscape with the triggers and bows, which is located to the south.
Mm-hmm.
In that we're approximately lined up with that building. That allows the outside storage to be at the rear of the building and keep all those kind of activities away from the street and the neighbors to the, that'd be the west, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not totally related to the north buffer, but it's kind of all kind of wrapped up into one where you set the building a little bit closer to Bishopsgate Road, create the buffer along the north side, and the main activities with respect to Roswell being located behind the building. So
thank you.
The building acts as the buffer.
That's the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the applicants. Just looking through this, and the one question I just wanted a little more clarification on is around the noise. I know it says here that there's going to be on, again, page 8, a noise study. I deal in my ward. There's a industrial area not that far from a residential area, and the noise is generally okay, unless the windows and doors are open. And on hot days, the windows and doors are open, and we get loads of complaints about the daytime noise. Still within the bylaw, but still something that bothers the residents there. Is this the sort of operation that requires or will require extended doors and windows open in summer months, or is it something where it's going to be more temperature controlled inside during those summer months?
And Mr. Counselor, Bob Phillips again, the activities of this operation are primarily internal to the building. Mr. Roswell's gone through and he's, sort of restricted his activities to the inside for the primary operations. The only thing that happens outside is the outside storage and probably some loading and unloading, and again, at the rear of the building.
But there, just to clarify a little bit more, but it won't be a usual practice to have, say the gates open and inside and that noise escaping, because you can do a noise study on a closed building, and as soon as it's open, that noise study isn't very valuable to the neighbors.
No, the primary activities are within the building.
With doors closed. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Howes, please.
Thank you. My question has been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the applicant, I believe. Just a simple question. Why did you choose to place this facility north of Triggers and Bows rather than south of Triggers and Bows? Because some of the issues that you're getting from local residents would have been significantly diminished if you'd been further to the south. Is there a good reason for that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons.
All right.
One is the three-phase power has to come from north of Bishopsgate or north of the Highway 53, as well as the lands to the south are lower. So we wanted to be up on the higher ground if we could. We figured we have lots of room between us and the residential areas that we wouldn't cause any problems.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that on page 29, it talks about a 300-meter influence zone, and clearly where you're planning to locate your plant edges onto 300 meters away from Elizabeth Avenue, whereas if you were to the south of it, you'd be well clear. I think some of the issues that have been raised would not have been raised had you been to the south rather than the north.
Had we known at the beginning there were this many objections, we probably would have looked at things a little closer. At that point, we didn't think there was going to be a problem with anyone. We've been in the same place with close neighbors since 1959 and never had complaints.
Frankly, the discussion that's going to occur through the site plan approval process are intended to address those issues with the residential that's located away. And certainly there is an economic decision that was made to locate to the north of Triggers and Bows rather than the south.
Is it a significant cost to go south rather than north?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chambers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple clarifications, if I might. I'm not an expert on concrete or cement, but when I say cement, I'm talking about the gray stuff that you use to mix with water and aggregate to make concrete. A lot of people get cement and concrete mixed up, and I don't want to confuse people by what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about soft concrete as opposed to finished hardened concrete. And my question is, if I understand the application, I'll ask it in form of a question. Will there be any soft concrete trucked into or out of the plant?
Mr. Counselor, Bob Phillips. soft concrete being sort of a concrete batching plant? No. This is concrete that's mixed on the site and put into molds to create tanks. Full stop.
So when I look out and see what people call a cement truck with the big tumbler on the back of it, which is actually a concrete truck, not a cement truck, there will be none of these trucks going in or out of the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I expect that the cement that is brought onto the site will be trucked in. How is the cement, which is the gray stuff that you mix with aggregate and water, how is that arriving onto the site, and how often will that happen?
I will let Scott answer sort of the question about the frequency, but the cement powder that goes into the making of the concrete will be trucked on or trucked into the site and probably stored in a silo. Scott?
Yes, the concrete is, or the cement powder is trucked in with trucks. Right now we're receiving a load of cement powder about every 2 to 3 weeks.
So to clarify then, you'll see a cement truck carrying the cement powder once every 2 or 3 weeks.
That's correct.
And you won't see the tumbler trucks hauling the wet concrete at all, essentially.
That's correct.
But what you will see is probably what I'll call stake trucks trucking out septic tanks and catch basins, etc.
Again, correct.
And how often do you see that happen?
Obviously, that's market driven because he makes tanks and depending on the demand. But Scott, what's your sort of current or traffic levels?
Right at this point, with our crane trucks, we have 3 of them running, and today I had 2 trucks leave. That's a little atypical for this time of year. Usually you'll have about 6 to 8 loads a day leaving and empty trucks returning.
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No, seeing none. Are there any members of the public that want to speak against this application or to this application?
Mayor Bailey, Rose Reed is on the line. She would like to speak to the application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one other request. I know our letter has been received and read, and we are asking that the council still put the proper restrictions in the bylaws to prevent a batching plant from coming to this location in the future, though I do understand that there was clarity at the beginning of this conversation that this is not a batching plant, but we would still ask for that to be put into the bylaws that it can't become that. And we're still wondering how, if it's rezoned, does that reduce the value of our home in the future?
Who's going to speak to that?
I'll talk to the redefinition, and then maybe Rob can talk to the value. Basically, as you can see through the planner, this is not intended to be a concrete batching plant, and we have no objection to the changing of the definition or the wording of the bylaw that restricts or eliminates a concrete batching plant from the definition. Maybe Rob can speak to the value, and I know that's a very tough item to talk about.
Mr. Mayor, that's a tough one, as Mr. Phillips has indicated. I'm going to go back slightly and indicate that as the planner indicated at the beginning of the conversation, we have formally requested an amendment to clarify the intent by changing the description of the operation to facility for the manufacture and fabricating of precast concrete products. And I've used those words because that is basically the wording that the council of the day established for the Stubbe plant in New Durham. Although Stubbe has got a larger plant operation and certainly more activity than Roswell would ever do. It is not the intent, and we hope the bylaw could be changed to reflect those wordings and get rid of the word batching plant. This was the word batching plant was one that staff basically directed us to use, and at the time I guess we thought, yeah, that makes sense, but this certainly after receiving the letter from that we received today, I felt it important that we change the description, and we hope that that is reflected in the zoning. As far as value is concerned, you know, I can't really address that. I'm not an economist. As far as property values are concerned, the area is designated employment, has been designated employment for at least 20 years. Upon amalgamation, it was in fact designated as a heavy industrial area. And in the new 2012 official plan, it was changed to the nomenclature of employment. So the intent certainly was there, you know, for the last 21 years. So, but I can't really respond to real estate values. I apologize for that.
And maybe I'll just kind of add one item is generally real estate values, and please, I'm not an expert, but real estate values are based on land use designations in the area. And as Rob has pointed out, the land use designation has been there for quite some time. So I would kind of respectfully suggest that the values have been established for residential on the basis of that designation being there. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, does that clarify anything for you? Do you feel any better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns? I haven't spoke very much on this. I'm very glad to see you back here, Mr. Roswell. I think the placement of your building directly next to your neighbors is the setback is perfect. I think you're a perfect match for what you're trying to do. I have a friend who has a mold concrete factory, Stone Line, Fred Rossi, so I know sort of what goes on in molds and cement, and I have no concerns at all about what's going to be seen by your neighbors. I think Burford is lucky that you came back. I feel very lucky that you've come back. And if there's nothing else, I'd like to declare this hearing closed. You acknowledge the other person.
I believe Councillor Miller has his hand up.
Councillor Miller, I don't see his, oh, there you are. I couldn't see you within all the birch trees there. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not quite clear on when we jump in and when we don't. Like, I don't want to jump in on the public part of it. So, but if I could just share two comments on this application. One, I did attend the June 29th Zoom meeting with most of the neighbors, and I got to give Delia a lot of credit. I thought she ran it quite well. And as Matt pointed out in the preamble to this application, the main concerns I felt were addressed in that Zoom meeting with the neighbors. And everybody had ample opportunity to ask questions, because I know Scott kept that, and Delia kept asking, are there any more questions? Are there any more questions? So they give them lots of time to do that. So I do feel we had a good airing out. And second of all, I did speak with the neighbor of the owner of Trigger and Bow, Dave Lansdowne. I want to keep calling him Dave Attenborough, Dave Lansdowne. And he for some reason, he said he couldn't get in for whatever reason, but he wanted me to pass on the message that he fully supports this application. So just those two comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank
For
you.
the record, it's Landsborough.
Who said that?
I stand corrected. Thank you. Attenborough, Landsborough.
Thank you. Is that you, Councillor Wheat?
No, it was the other John.
Sorry, I thought you were sleeping, Councillor Wheat. You startled me.
No, I'm not asleep. I'm watching the
Thank
hockey
you.
game.
Thank you. Councillor Wheat, you have the, first of all, we want to acknowledge that everyone has seen the letter that was on the addendum for tonight. With that, Councillor Wheat, you have the resolution?
Yes, I do. It's moved by myself, second by Councillor Chambers, that application ZBA 8-20-MD from GH Engineering Agent for Scott Roswell be approved.
Thank
And
you.
I'll speak to it before.
Any other questions? Councillor Chamber, you're first.
Just to understand that the wording of the approval is eliminating the concrete batching plant verbiage and replacing it with whatever that was, and that it is subject to site plan control, which will be hopefully address some of the issues that are outstanding.
That's correct.
Councillor Wheat, you're next.
No, I'm just responding to Member Chambers that that is correct. What he was requesting is correct.
That's right. Thank you. Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you. I won't ask Councillor Wheat what the score is, but what I would like to ask is the piece about the concern from the resident regarding the batching plant. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding would be that, well, we can't say indefinitely that there could never be a batching plant on the premises because that could be changed by another council. If there ever was a desire to put a batching plant there, they'd have to go through the entire planning process and apply for it and the rest of it. So while we can't necessarily say never, ever, ever, there would still be a process before they could even, anyone could even attempt to put a batching plant in that area, correct?
Yes. If that's directed to me, Mark, yes.
Or staff if
They'd have to
anybody
make
from planning.
another application, yes.
I think Mrs. Reed got what she wanted tonight. And if there's no opposition to the Roswell application, I think all is well. And we will make sure the wording is changed, Councillor Chambers, to make everyone happy.
I'm requesting a recorded vote.
All right. Are there any other questions before we call for a recorded vote? Madam Clerk, recorded vote, please.
Councillor Wheat, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine?
Yes.
Councillor Leferrier?
Yes.
Councillor Howes?
Yes.
Councillor Bell?
Yes.
Councillor Pierce?
Yes.
Councillor Chambers?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Coleman?
Yes.
Councillor Gatward?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Definitely yes.
Okay, motion's carried.
Thank you. We're at 5B now, housekeeping amendments. Brandon, you still with us?
I'm here. Good Mayor and members of council. So this is a continuation of what you heard last meeting with housekeeping, and we're coming for a recommendation this time after some circulation and formal comments that we've received. So again, this is general housekeeping to address formatting errors, implementation barriers, consolidation, errors and omissions, and some mapping updates as well. So in line with the previous noted amendment categories that were circulated at the previous meeting, I've updated that chart based on some of the comments that have been received. So that's attachment 1 to your report. And then, attachment 2 to the report. And then attachment 3 is the draft bylaw. And then there is as well just a chart showing what is existing in the bylaw, and based on the proposed changes, what the bylaw would look like with those changes enacted. So I will note that we had some good conversation with a number of the divisions that were circulated for comments. And those have been integrated into the draft bylaw and the proposed changes that you see before you. So we are recommending that the proposed amendments as included in the draft bylaw be approved. The amendments are technical in nature and work to bring the bylaw further into conformity with the PPS, the official plan, and improve the general implementation of the bylaw. So in order to maintain the best functionality of the bylaw as well, it's worth noting that the tracking of possible future changes is going to continue to be seen at a later date, hopefully early next year. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Bailey if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Brandon. I'll declare this public meeting open. Are there any questions? Heather, is there anyone here to speak?
No, there's no one here to speak to this application.
Are there any questions to Brandon before we? Councillor Bell first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brandon. Item 2.5, Brandon, just a clarification on my part. One point you mentioned a maximum of 20 model homes, and then another section you make a note of 8 model homes. I mean, 8 and 20 sounds a lot anyway, but I don't know which one's the answer.
Through you, Mayor Bailey, to you, Councillor Bell. That is correct. So there was some conversation about those numbers, and that's why they're both in there. But the final number that we landed on based on conversations with staff was to allow for 8. So that would be based on having a model home agreement put in place through our development services folks with the developer, and they would be allowed a maximum of 8 or a temporary sales trailer.
Okay, thank you for that. Question on 212, the small the shipping containers. Do we want to make any reference to the fact that they may become used in small homes? It's another subject that this council is looking at.
Through Mayor Bailey to you, Councillor Bell. So we have removed some of the stipulations on shipping containers. There was one or is one that exists in the bylaw that expressly prohibits them from being habitable, with the idea that our ARU changes are coming forward, and the idea that shipping containers can be used in a nice, relatively nice way as a dwelling. We've kind of removed that. So that won't stand in the way, but that's not to say, dependent on the use of the structure, the way that it's in these sections, the way that it refers to it is the use would be either temporary or permanent based on storage uses. But like I say, with the ARU stuff coming forward in the future, we'll probably see some more specific information about shipping containers in that.
Okay, thanks, Brandon.
Any other questions, Brandon? Seeing none, we'll call the public hearing closed.
Councillor Miller again, sir.
Oh my goodness. Councillor Miller, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. 3 to Brandon. Just to be clear, Brandon, because it wasn't in the report, there was no comments from outside agencies like developers or anything like that?
No, we did not receive any comments, any formal comments per se. It was circulated in the newspaper. I did send some emails to a few of the developers, and through our regular circulation to the developers, they were notified of the housekeeping amendments as well. And the information was posted on the website, but we did not receive any formal comments at this time.
Okay, I find that odd because in the past we've had these amendments and we'd always get, some of the developers coming in. So, okay, I guess no news is good news.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that the application ZBA 12/20/BK from the County of Brant with respect to housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw be approved as outlined in staff report RPT-20-88.
Any other questions or concerns, clarification? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Moving us to number 5C, Brookfield. Ryan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject lands are located on the north side of Hartley Avenue, west of Drake Avenue in the former town of Paris. Subject lands have a frontage of approximately 130 meters on Hartley Avenue and are approximately 1.87 hectares or 4.6 acres in size. The applicant is proposing to amend the current zoning on the subject lands from special exception residential multiple medium density RM2-7 to a new special exception residential medium density RM2-7 zone to permit back-to-back row house dwellings as an additional form of housing on site, as well as site-specific provisions related to lot coverage and setbacks. The applicant has submitted a concurrent site plan control application. That application is currently under review for its second submission to the county. Staff is of the opinion that the proposal helps to bridge a noted gap in the housing options in the county of Brant, and that the proposed housing form is appropriate for the orderly development of the subject lands. Staff is therefore recommending that this application be approved. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we begin, I'll declare this public meeting open. Is there anyone here, Heather, to speak to this?
Aiden Decima from Brookfield is here.
Welcome, Aiden. You're going to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're going to answer questions for us?
Yes, I'm here to answer any questions.
We have one from Councillor Howes first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. And this question is directed actually more towards staff than to Aiden. And I'm asking it because I know we're going to be asked it. I like the fact that this application is bridging a gap in a type of housing that we need in our community. My first question is: was this phase of was the application for this phase initiated before or after we tapped the brakes? That's my first question. Then I've got a couple other questions.
Aiden?
I think it's, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a question more for staff than Aiden.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to note the subdivision itself as a whole was approved by the Local Plans Appeal Tribunal, formerly Ontario Municipal Board, through a previous decision. And so the tap the brakes resolution only came forward, I believe it was in the spring of 2019, and this subdivision was approved at the board well in advance of that motion being brought to this council.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My second question is about the parking, and Aiden is aware that I have had some concerns about the parking side of it. There's 71 dwellings are proposed for this property, and there are, I believe, now 31 spare parking spots. And I appreciate the fact that the developer has made that an adjustment to increase that. I still hold some concerns that we're going to have calls complaining about the parking. And I noticed from our package that even our own community services staff have registered a concern about how the overflow parking might end up going out to Hartley, which is already very full of cars all the time parked. So I'm just wondering, is there any potential to improve this parking issue? And I acknowledge that I believe that the ratio that has been achieved meets our own County of Brant requirements. Perhaps that could be clarified, but and maybe in a broader question, we need to look at whether our requirements for parking need to be looked at for the future. Thank you.
Are you looking for a response, Councillor House?
It's 7 o'clock.
I'm looking for a response on the parking and maybe from our staff a response to how are we dealing with the concern expressed by community services?
I can start with the parking question. Thank you, Councillor House. Through Mr. Mayor. So we have increased the parking from 18 visitor parking spaces to 30 visitor parking spaces. And the county bylaw for visitor parking is 0.35 units or parking spaces per unit. And we're at 0.42 spaces per unit now. So we are exceeding the current county bylaw. We tried to put in as much parking as we could. We heard the comments from council at the meeting in July, and then we went back to our engineers and to our planners and tried to maximize the amount of visitor parking that we could put on the site.
Oh, okay, so thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So bottom line is that you have maximized the potential for extra parking, spare parking, and you do exceed the county's own requirement.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Pierce, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Aidan. First of all, I'm going to say thank you for listening. There was a lot of things put to you at the last meeting regarding parking, regarding some other things. You did go back. You found some extra parking spaces, so thank you for that. My question is, it's kind of twofold. So, with what you just said there, the bylaw states that it's 0.35 parking spaces per unit. If we're talking 71 units, that's, I would say, 25 spots. So two things. Number one, the original application you brought to us wasn't anywhere close to that. So that's kind of disappointing. Number two, after conversations, now all of a sudden that you have found this space to put these extra parking spots in, what I'm trying to understand is, where did this space come from? Is it space now that all of a sudden lot coverage on these are going to be a little bit bigger percentage wise? Where did you find this extra space? And when I get that answer, I've got a part B to that one, if you could, please.
Sure. Through Mr. Mayor. So the additional spaces that we found were along laneway C, and these this laneway, what we ended up doing is we just extended the width of the road. So the road right away currently is still 8.5 meters, but we just extended the pavement. Initially, we had a buffer or a larger buffer zone between the road pavement and our second phase of our community. And so we used that buffer space, or some of that buffer space, and we just extended the pavement to allow for this lay-by parking along laneway C.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now the part B comes in, and you kind of went the direction I wanted you to. Are there any other spots within this, I'll call it subdivision here, where we can find this extra space to put in more parking lots? Or are you telling us now that the plan that we're seeing tonight is maxed out at the maximum number of parking spots that you can possibly fit into this area?
Yeah, right now we're maxed out at the number of parking spaces that we can put in.
So there's no
Just
bigger
based
buffers or
on-
anything like that?
There is not, no.
Okay, I appreciate your answers. And again, I want to say thank you for coming back to us with changes.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. My question is more for staff. Is it appropriate to ask it now?
Certainly.
Okay, but before I say that, my concern is also parking, as you're hearing from those of us speaking right now. But it's not specific to this development; it's to this type of development. I am for more dense housing where appropriate. But as was noted, this first application came in at 0.25 spaces, and then the county actually requires 0.35, and they've come back to us at 0.42 as a ratio, which I appreciate. On top of that, Aidan reached out to me about some questions I had at the last meeting about the garages being full size where a van or truck could fit in them, which is good, and the driveways as well being full size for a large van or truck. However, in more dense housing, we have smaller houses, and people tend to use their garages for storage, as Steve mentioned last meeting. They tend to, they're going to be using their frontage because there's no backyard for some activity. My question is to staff on what's the process for us to change this ratio and have it be somewhat tied to density, because I think we're going to get more applications for things like this. With again, thanks to the developer for working with us on some of the concerns we have.
Thanks very much, and through the mayor to Councillor Leferrier and also to House, because you've both brought up this point. Staff could look at looking at that ratio specifically for in our zoning bylaw. This would be something that we could address during a future zoning bylaw update. So staff will add that to our list of things to look into moving forward, and we'll have a look to see what best practices are out there, and do our best to adopt those and bring those to you for consideration.
Which may also help us with the RU discussion, because I know that's a sticking point there too. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Bell? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Aidan. Thank you for all the correspondence we've had. I appreciate you following up on all kinds of things. I just draw attention to page 110 in the staff report, which says that this form of housing bridges a noted housing gap within the county. Maybe I should ask staff first, what do you mean by noted housing gap? Can you explain it in either financial terms or in aerial terms?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct. That it has been noted within a growth type municipality like the county, we do have ongoing higher density residential developments, and this is a form of housing, and it's a form of housing that's unavailable within the county at the current time. And we would note that as a housing gap, because there is a gap between let's call them row house development townhouses like are also being proposed on this site, and then higher density condo or I apologize, apartment style or even stacked townhouses like we're seeing at Two Willow. This fits somewhere in the middle of those in terms of a density as well as an attainability, if you want to call it that, for people looking to purchase a home in the county. And I really do think it is a good thing for the county that we're making this available as another form of sort of medium density housing in the county.
Could we translate that into what you think would be an affordable house in that meets the requirements you've just described? What price do we think about? What is affordable to people in our county? Because for me, the housing gap is a gap where people who want to downsize will find somewhere that they can actually afford within the county rather than outside of the county. So can you be approximate in terms of what you think that price would be?
You, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I could comment on the price because it's relative to the geography, to the municipality, and each different municipality. What I can comment on is that this is clearly targeted to a market of either first-time home buyers or retirees, downsizers, like Aidan had alluded to, I believe, at the information meeting. It is relative to the market itself, and in planning, unfortunately, we don't typically get into the finances of a potential first-time home buyer, for example. What we're interested in is making sure that these types of housing options are available based on the current market.
So as we enter into our official plan, and I'm diverting a bit here, one of my concerns would be that we actually produce housing in our county that is affordable. So the question that I'm going to ask Aidan, what price are you going to charge for these back-to-back townhomes?
So thank you, Councillor Bell. So I reached out to our marketing group, and we're still working on lumber costs and trying to sort all that out with our trades. And obviously with COVID, there is a shortage of lumber. However, I was able to come back and they'll likely start in the low 400s for the back-to-back units. That's what we're targeting right now, but it all depends on what our costs come back at.
Yeah, my concern is that doesn't seem to fit the noted gap, at least as I see it, in terms of what is affordable for the people in our county that want to downsize. It may be attractive to people coming in to the county, but it's not going to help our county residents as such. One quick question on parking, if I may. I appreciate you've done more in creating more parking spaces, but between blocks 1, 2, 6, and 7, there isn't a single visitor parking spot. I can imagine that's going to be a hot spot, as Councillor Howes was describing earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howes, please.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Mayor. And just my comments more in response to Councillor Bell. Just respectfully, I think we have to be careful using the word affordable next to the word housing. Because as soon as you, like, affordable housing by definition is housing that's 80% of market value or less. And it's actually a structured definition. And I think maybe what Councillor Bell is intending is maybe attainable housing. I understand the spirit behind that, and I agree with the spirit behind it. We definitely need more inventory of what I keep referring to as modest homes for folks who are downsizing, for people who are starting out. I was hoping that this particular property might see some prices that started with a 3. Sounds like now it might be prices that start with a 4, which doesn't serve some of the needs of our community as much. But in today's market, this might be the closest that we can get right now. So, thank you.
Any other speakers? Is there any members of the public here, Madam Clerk?
No, I don't have anyone here tonight.
All right. Seeing none, I'll call this public hearing closed and call on Councillor McAlpine, please.
Okay, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers that application ZBA 13-20-RC from Malone Given Parsons Limited, agent of Brookfield Residential Ontario Limited, owners of property located at 113 Hartley Avenue, to permit back-to-back row houses dwellings and site-specific provisions related to the lot coverage and minimum setbacks be approved as outlined in staff report RPT-20-99.
Any other questions, concerns, clarifications? Everyone's clear on what they're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 5D. 5 Melissa Ave. Amanda.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this application is to rezone the subject lands to allow for a temporary garden suite for a maximum of 20 years. Based on staff's understanding, the applicant is proposing a self-contained mobile home with an area of approximately 90 square meters to allow for a parent to reside separately on the subject lands. Staff note the subject lands have a shared access agreement with 7 Melissa Avenue and have confirmed the existing agreement would not need to be modified to accommodate the garden suite. The subject lands are located north of Melissa Avenue and the Kimberly Road intersection. They are immediately south of the home hardware facility on Bryan Drive. The subject lands are irregular in shape and are designated urban residential and are located within the secondary settlement area and are located within the built boundary. The County of Brant official plan speaks to permitting a garden suite for a maximum of 10 years. However, since approval of the official plan, the Planning Act has been revised to allow for a maximum of 20 years. The county has taken a consistent approach and allowed temporary garden suites for a maximum of 20 years to be consistent with the Planning Act. The subject lands are zoned suburban residential. The zoning bylaw does allow for garden suites on a lot that do not currently have a second dwelling unit. 1 additional parking space is required for garden suites. The applicant will be required to enter into a garden suite agreement with the county and provide securities. Through public circulation, no comments have been received. Staff are recommending approval of the application, subject to conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I'll first declare the public meeting open. Questions, Councillor Ferrier?
Yes, I just want to make sure that I read this right, Mr. Mayor, and this is to Amanda, that it's a 20-year initial application with the potential for 3-year continuations after that 20 years, or is that incorrect?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. So the Planning Act does allow for a maximum of 20 years with possible extensions every 3 year for 3 years after that. But at that 3-year point, we would reevaluate the application.
Right. So it's not something that's necessarily transferable with the sale of a home or anything like that. But we've had situations when I first started on council of younger adults who are living with disabilities, and you know, they were worried about their garden suites that they were living in and having some independence in getting basically the window closing. So this would prevent that in those situations if we use it in that way, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just real quick, and it follows up on what Mark was asking. If the owners of this property sell the property, does this continue on to the new owners, or if you just clarify that a bit, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if they do decide to sell the property, it would carry on with that sale. It's on title.
Any other questions? Is there a representative, or you are here to answer questions? Mr. Phillips?
Mr. Van Porten has a presentation, I believe.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members. I'll be very brief. This application is to allow for a parent to live with one of their children on the same property. It is for a garden suite, which is recognized by the Planning Act as pointed out by the planner for 20 years, which can be renewable upon application to this council, to this municipality. Garden suites are required to be portable in nature, and certainly a number of prefab builders are starting to recognize the need for garden suites and recognizing the fact that's a niche market that is being addressed. The proponent have in fact entered into, I believe, an offer to purchase a garden suite from a firm in Barrie. And as I said, they have to be portable by Planning Act definition as well as the official plan definition. This is getting to be more common. In fact, upon submitting this application, approximately 1 month later, somebody else approached us, and in fact, I've submitted another application on another site. So we're starting to see these types of units crop up. We're all getting older, I guess, as am I. We recognize and appreciate the activity of staff in supporting this application. I've explained to the applicant what is required as far as an agreement as securities are concerned, and they're quite satisfied and quite looking forward to, the parent is quite looking forward to the move. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any members of the public that are speaking to or against this application? Madam Clerk?
No, I don't have any members of the public. Thanks.
Any other questions before we declare this hearing closed? Seeing none, the hearing is closed. I'd like to then take to Councillor Chambers, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's pleased to move, and Councillor Weed is pleased to second that the application we've talked about be approved.
Any other questions, clarification? Everyone is clear on what they're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for the work you've done on this. The 10 to 20 year thing is very good to see. Makes a lot of people, I think, very happy. So thank you for that. 5E, 185 Oakland Drive. Dan is going to make the presentation for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The zoning application ZBA 17 -20 -DN for the Flux Brewing at 185 Oakland Road was presented last month for information purposes. This evening, staff are presenting a recommendation that the application be approved. So I'll just go through my presentation on the existing conditions. Once again, the property is designated in the official plan as employment area. This employment area is intended to support a wide range of employment, commercial type uses, as well as some agricultural uses that are in existence. The current zoning on the property is a light industrial, site specific, which currently permits a livestock use, which the applicants are proposing to remove. The proposal, and I got a slight modification to the recommendation through some discussions with Councillor Gatward. The proposal is to amend the application or amend the site-specific zoning to permit the microbrewery as a permitted use. And the specifics are that the proposal is to utilize 501 square meters of the existing building for the microbrewery. And this includes the brewing process and storage, support office, tasting area, and retail sales. The second portion to that rezoning is that the special provisions that do permit the boarding of horses and the riding stable, so those livestock uses are no longer in use and not required, so they are proposed to be removed. Through the discussion at the information meeting and earlier today, Councillor Gatward indicated that the concerns of odor related to the outdoor storage of the spent grain and any uses that are associated with the brewing process kind of after things have been mashed together. So it's being recommended and requested that we add a provision to the bylaw which speaks to that outdoor storage. So our staff's recommendation is as follows. So the modification of the site-specific M2-10 zoning to permit the microbrewery having a total area of 501 square meters as a permitted use. The update to the recommendation would add to prohibit outdoor storage of spent grain, malt, and materials associated with the brewing process. And third, to remove the boarding of horses and riding stables as permitted uses. So based on this, and I know clerk has the wording, staff are recommending approval of the application. Any questions?
Thank you. I will declare this public meeting open. Are there, first of all, is the applicant here?
I am here, Mr. Mayor.
You're here. Okay. Are there any questions to the applicant, please? Seeing none, Councillor Wheat.
Why did this appear in the Brantford Expositor that it had already been approved and it hadn't even come to this meeting yet?
Who are you directing your question to, sir?
The applicant.
Sure, I don't, the intent was not for it to be, to say in the Brantford Expositor that it was already approved. I'm not sure it was worded that way specifically. We actually, you know, I guess this is a learning for me. You have to be careful when you're talking to a reporter. We shared a best wishes date of August 29th for opening, and we didn't really think that he was going to run with that date, but I guess he did. We were kind of disappointed in that as well because now we're really under pressure. But that was certainly not the intent to say that it was already approved.
Well, I was really taken back that council had already approved it when we haven't even had the meeting yet. And I read that in the Brantford Expositor last weekend.
Yeah, with all due respect, Councillor Wheat, I don't believe that it said anything about the council already approving that.
No, but the article gave me the impression that it already was approved and you were ready to go.
Yeah, I'm sorry you got that impression because that was never our intent. And again, it's my learning for talking to the press. We're certainly trying to start a business in a very interesting time here. And we're doing our best to build up some momentum for this business when we finally do get approval to run. But it was never our intent to say that we had approval prior to this meeting.
Yeah, things can happen. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the applicant, I'll give you a chance to do some advertising. Why Flux? What's the significance of Flux Brewery?
Okay, thanks for asking that, Councillor Chambers. The meeting, we had a bunch of really terrible names to begin with this process. We came up with an idea of, for me, it's a career change. So we came up with the name Pivot. And the career change is that I used to run the Arista Bakery in Brantford. So it's quite a big career change for me. We gave that to the lady that's running our brand and asked her about the name, and she came back with us with the name Flux. And what Flux signifies to us is a continuous state of change, is always being open to new and exciting things. I think that's part of the fun of running a microbrewery, is that you can always change the beers. You don't have to, you know, I'm not serving Molson Canadian every night, and no disrespect for any Molson Canadian lovers out there, but you know, we can always change the what we're doing in the brewery. And it's also, Flux also happens to be, you know, the state of liquid and flow. So it kind of paired together with that state of continuous change, that state of liquid and flow. We're hoping to flow a lot of beer out of our brewery, and yeah, hope everybody gets a chance to come and enjoy it.
I'm glad I asked.
And I think the name is very clever. Councillor Pierce.
No, I'm good.
You're good. Are there any other questions to the applicant? Are there any members of the public that want to speak to or against the applicant?
Mr. Mayor, I see none present.
Thank you. I'll declare the public hearing closed. Are there any final questions, clarification? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Everyone's clear on what they're voting on. All those in favor?
I have to make the motion, I believe, on this one.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that application ZBA 17-20-DN from Jeremy Hansen Flux Brewing Company, or brewery company, applicant for concession 1, part lot 5, RP2R 1496, part 1, geographic township of Oakland, located at 185 Oakland Road, to permit a microbrewery having a total area of 501 meters squared as permitted use, and to remove the board of horses and riding stable as permitted use be approved. That was quite a mouthful.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Gatward.
And also the third item that the planner Dan mentioned, which Councillor Ferrier didn't read, and Dan did read. Dan, would you read that as part of the recommendation, or Heather?
To modify the light industrial zone?
No.
Oh.
It was to
That's
do
all
with
I
the
have.
storage. It was to do with the no outside storage malt.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gatward. Heather, do you have the wording for the?
I do. It's to prohibit the outdoor storage of spent grain, malt, and materials associated with the brewing process.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Councillor Gatward, you're satisfied?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that that was part of the recommendation, and that's what's going to be legally included, so that if this brewery is so successful and is ever sold in the future, that condition would be on there for the new owner. We know that Jeremy said at our last meeting, he plans to truck it off site to a cattle farmer, and that's great. I'm glad to hear that. But a new owner may not want to do that. And so that's why I wanted that clause in there, because those materials emit the most odors, and we don't want to have complaints in the future that the county has to deal with. It also protects our residential area surrounding the breweries. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Everyone's clear on what they're voting on? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Number 6, Development Services Policy Reports. Number A, Official Plan Work Plan Update Next Steps. Who has that?
I have it. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that staff report RPT-20-85 official plan, work plan update, and proposed amendment to the growth plan forecasting to 2051 be received as information.
Are there any questions to the report? Councillor House first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jennifer. I recall that when this council started our term, one of the first presentations we received from staff was from the planning department, and I seem to recall that we were given a number of approximately 5,400 dwellings that were already in the pipeline in the county of Brant, primarily in Paris. So my question is, given that approximate number and given the growth requirement being mandated by the province by 2051, are we already there in terms of what we're likely to achieve with the planning applications that are already either at a stage of approval or appeal in the pipeline? Aren't we already there? Thank you.
Jennifer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yeah, so basically our growth forecasting, the province has initiated a different change through proposed amendment 1. And I have to reiterate it, this is draft at the moment to 2051, but we've submitted comment in the support of that change. And at the moment, so if you have your package on page 195, there's actually the County of Brant housing supply in attachment number 2. And that actually outlines the housing supply for active development right now in the pipeline. And basically there's a general assumption for the county and also for the essentially Paris at the moment, that the current active development applications will be built within the planning horizon, which was to 2041. Now we have a change to 2051, which we have to adjust our numbers to. And basically that first report, and which leads to tap the brakes, at first step, we looked at the residential supply, and it does appear that we basically have enough registered subdivisions, draft approved, and through our vacant land needs, that will take us to about 2031 to 2036 at the moment. So it's just that extra piece that we're adding that the province has made us look at 2051, where we have to adjust our land needs assessment, which is what our consultant is doing at the moment. So in essence, to answer your question, we do have enough land supply. If you actually look at that page, that's going to take us to about 2031 to 2036 for active and draft approved subdivisions at the moment.
But
thank you.
If I may, thank you. Just to follow up on that. So, and again, I'm sorry if I'm asking dumb questions, but so we have an extra 10 years to achieve the numbers that the province are mandating that we reach. But and I'm not asking about our land use. I'm asking about applications in the pipeline. If I'm understanding you, we already have enough applications in the pipeline to reach the mandated targets, and we have an extra 10 years to get there. Is that accurate?
Through the mayor to the councillor, that's not 100% accurate. We basically, if you look at the housing supply active development applications, we have enough to reach us to about 2036 at the moment. So other than that, beyond that, our land needs assessment will do the evaluation, which is the people per jobs per hectare with employment, to see that then we'll look at the new numbers that the province has revised. And I have to reiterate that the revision to the growth plan puts us at a lower population than that was originally proposed in 2019. The county's only got about 2,000 people difference, but it is lower than what was proposed in 2019. They've adjusted some numbers just because our employment numbers were not reaching their targets. So they've done some adjustment, they've listened to us, which is great. And now we're providing additional feedback so that we can move forward with what we want and we see, and that's the high forecast scenario. And they're looking at all our active and draft approved to 2036. And the county was just meeting its target or just below. And that's why they've dropped us down a few thousand people to make us to go to 2051. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jennifer. 3 questions, if that's okay. First one is related to page 199, and its terminology. It's County of Brant recommended population forecast. Who recommends it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bell. So what this is our land needs assessment. So our consultant is looking at all of our numbers. And so what it is, the province through proposed amendment 1, which was the package that the province had the revised numbers, is that we look at them and then our consultant is crunching the numbers. And then we tell the province whether their forecasting analysis is either correct and what scenario that we will be going for, and then the additional work to 2051. So when it says recommended, that's basically like the province has laid out 4 different scenarios for municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So they're asking the municipalities, which one do you think? But the problem is we can't go with full forecasts, and we do not want an open-ended maximum. So that's why we are telling the province what we would like, which is a recommendation for us based on our active subdivision development, our draft approved, and what numbers we foresee are possible.
Thank you, Jennifer. So if I understand correct, there are choices. And if I'm looking at the graph on page 198, the recommended forecast is actually the most stringent one, the most aggressive one. Why would we do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bell. So the most aggressive one is actually not what we're recommending. The most aggressive one is actually the 2019 growth plan. So the 2041 number. And then there was actually an adjustment made. So the one issue is that we're actually recommending the 57,000. So it's a bit of a misnomer. We're about the cherry picking of which one, because you can't pick a different employment forecast and a different population. They have to go hand in hand because the jobs and people per hectare have to match. And it's all based on what's currently in the pipeline of what we have, and then the population numbers from the province. So the population forecasting we get from the province. And then they crunch the numbers in terms of a growth forecast, which is employment and population. And it's all based on, migration and death and birth rates and financial forecasts, jobs and employment land opportunities. So we had a bit of an issue with the way that the province laid out these low, high, reference, and then amendment. It was very confusing at first. And basically the numbers that we're recommending is to the province, or based on the numbers, is that scenario, as I want to call it, they're calling high. So
yeah, so I'm confused now, Jennifer. Sorry about that. On page 199, it shows that a 61,000 number, not a 57,000 number. Am I misreading this?
So, okay, sorry, page 99. So through the mayor to the councillor. Yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize. It's the 61, because that's based on the high forecast. So there's a difference between the high and the reference. And actually now I'm confused.
It looks like we're going for the highest possible growth rate rather than something which might be easier to manage and gives us more flexibility as we go forward.
Actually, if you could turn to page 191, it's actually a bit better laid out so you can see the differences. So if you look at page 191 and see the forecast, you've got on the side the low, the reference, the high, and the amendment. Okay, so the low is 58,000, the reference is 59, the high is 61, and the original is between 58 and 61. So I apologize. I thought it was 57.
So the answer is 61.
Yes, because we're recommending the high forecast.
Okay, so my question still sits then. Why do we go for the most challenging one and not give ourselves a bit of flexibility? You don't have to answer it right now. I'll just leave it as an open question. If I could just move on to another issue. I think it's page 98 again. 191. We're right today. We're about 40,000 people in the county, which is quite remarkable. If you just take the list of approved subdivisions through to 2031, there's another 14,000. So by the end of 2031, we're at 54,000 already. We're well above the curve. And I'm just wondering why we're going so helter-skelter up this curve when we should give ourselves more time to manage it.
Jennifer?
Is there another question or?
Yeah, I'm just commenting that I think we're going to be at 54,000 by 2031. So it really is picking up what Councillor House said. I think, we're almost there already. So we need to be quite selective about what we approve going forward.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bell. So I guess the forecasting and the growth numbers. So the 54,000 is the 2041 number. If you look at that page 191. And then the housing supply basically to 2041, which is what's already in the pipeline of the registered and draft approved. Those are the numbers that we have. So our current official plan with those registered and draft approved subdivisions will take us to 2036 to 2041 for those numbers, which takes us to about 54,000.
Okay. I think we need to do this offline. It's just too complicated.
Yeah.
So I have one final question. What does conformity mean? We have to be conforming by July 22.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bell. So the conformity exercise is basically that a municipality has to complete their municipal comprehensive review, which is this land needs assessment exercise, their growth management strategy, their phasing of development, their employment land strategy, and have it all in place within a policy document and the land use schedules and an official plan amendment by July 1st, approved by the minister, July 1st, 2022. Which means if you backdate that, and that's the revised official plan work plan, we actually have to bring our new official plan to you for adoption by about December at the latest of 2021, which leaves us about 15, 16 months at the most. So the conformity date is the fact that we don't want a plan that's appealable. We want to ensure that we have a new official plan that's approved. And if we're not in conformity, then we could be open up to appeals. So we're trying to get everything done in time, so we don't open us up to that type of scenario. Now, the caveat is that in the comments and also our letter to the province of Ontario, like many municipalities, we've asked for an extension of the conformity date for up to a year. And we have a meeting with the Ontario Growth Secretariat on August 12th. And we will be discussing it with their Assistant Deputy Minister to see if this is possible.
Thank you.
What does that mean to our official plan forecast if we go back a year for conformity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bell, it doesn't change anything. It just gives us a little bit more time to complete our land needs assessment. It just gives us more time because right now, because of COVID, we had to cancel our public consultation. The province, this is all draft material. We don't even know when this is going to be finalized. It could be October. And the problem is part of this package is the land needs assessment methodology. And we need that to actually do our work. So we're really running out of time. So that's why we're asking for the province. We're not sure if they're going to do that because it's made very clear. They stated in this amendment that there is no change in that date of July 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Jennifer, through you, I'm just gonna start anew and see if we can get some clarity. For it's hard to follow for us. I'm sure it's hard to follow at home, but just maybe correct me if I'm wrong. We initially had a growth plan that's dictated that we would have 57,000 people in the county of Brant by 2041. Correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, that was the 2019 growth plan. Correct.
And now with the 2051 new forecast that's been extended, we don't have to reach somewhere. We will reach somewhere between 61,000 and 58,000 people by 2051 instead. Correct?
That is correct.
And that in 2041, our goal is now to meet somewhere between 54,000 and 52,000 people in the county of Brant by 2041, which was our previous timeline limit, correct?
That is correct.
So we are going to be looking at between 600 and 700 new residents per year for the next 30 years.
That is correct, and that's a growth rate of between 1.2% and 1.3%.
Okay, so what I'd like to ask then, now that that's all clarified for my purposes, what I'd like to ask is, what does this do? And if this could be explained in such a way that somebody watching at home can understand, what does this do to our opportunities to phase and stage development over a longer period of time? What does that look like in practical terms?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Laferriere, it actually gives us some opportunities because right now, as you can see with our active development applications, registered and draft approved, basically that's what's in the pipeline with our current land use designations and also in terms of licensing requirements. So a lot of municipalities had asked the province for an additional time frame because of infrastructure, costing, asset management and capital finance plans to fund how you service different types of land use changes. So the extra time actually allows municipalities to do a comprehensive growth plan strategy and a phasing of development plan, which we've not really had here. And also the provincial policy statement dictates that you need to have up to a 25-year land supply at all times and in terms of actual serviceability of those lands. So it gives municipalities a little bit more flexibility because a lot of them do already have active development applications. So this now gives a bit of a future horizon. And as you know, infrastructure takes quite some time to plan and cost. And we're trying to complete communities like that, in terms of active transportation and services. And it's a costing mechanism to get there. So the extra time actually allows us to do a comprehensive 25-year plan for phasing of development and managing growth.
So when we were talking, I guess last year now about Mr. Mayor, about tapping the brakes and the need to slow down the amount of growth and elongate the timing and stage and phase development, there was some pushback, but the province is now in agreement with that, at least according to what we're hearing in this draft plan from them for the county.
Through the mayor to Councillor Laferriere, that is correct. And if you remember, I brought that report in the beginning of March, and I attended those workshops with the Ontario Growth Secretariat, and we actually had quite a bit of homework, as I'll call it. And we actually provided quite a few comments to them. And there's a real discrepancy between the outer ring municipalities versus the core of the GTA, as I'll call it. And they really did a lot of changes. And, we obviously do have some concerns with some of the technical background information of this, but we were quite pleased with some of the changes that they made, especially for the outer ring municipalities, because they're really looking at the changes and, the fact that we're rural. So it's allowing the fact that we don't have full servicing everywhere in this county. And that was a misnomer that they really did not sort of look into at the beginning with the original growth plan. So the rural communities, smaller communities, small settlement areas. So these changes, actually, there's some merit to them. So in the fact that now that we've got a bit more time to do a proper growth management strategy, and the phasing of development. So.
And just one last piece, and you don't have to answer it now if it's not available to be answered now because it might be more complex, but we have seen a large amount of the growth percentage-wise occurring in the former town of Paris. Does this in any way help to spread that growth in serviceable areas across the entire county? Again, in serviceable areas across the entire county in a more manageable way, or will it still be, for the most part, Paris and probably one day St. George taking on the brunt of these growth numbers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Laferriere. Yeah, so what's this doing is that the official plan with our municipal comprehensive review is working in tandem with a lot of other master plans, which is the transportation master plan, the St. George Class EA, the Keensville Class EA, the Burford master servicing, and the Paris master servicing. And all that is being tied in together. And we're working with operations hand in hand to make sure that the servicing of availability and the fact that we have to have complete communities, which means communities that have some type of servicing, including with transportation and services and, amenities for people as well. And this allows us to look at the whole county holistically at the same time, and also allow the fact that we have proper transportation networks and working with the city of Brantford, and it's all being integrated in a manner that it's a county picture snapshot that includes all of our communities, including the hamlets as well, for all the pieces of residential land needs and servicing in the future.
Thank you for your time and thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Councillor Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Jennifer, 3 questions. I hope they're 3 quick questions. First one, ARUs. We talked about that at our last planning meeting. Do you see them as a significant contributor to getting to our population targets quicker? And I didn't read anything about that in the reports. That's why I want to ask that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller. So that actually includes in our minimum density targets and our intensification targets. So ARUs would include part of our municipal comprehensive review. So we're adding them into our actual minimum target of 15% of our density. So it is included, and we are tracking the numbers. And I can ask our director of planning maybe to add something in just about the way that ARUs is asking about how we're tracking them in the future and the report going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, and through the mayor. It's a great question, and we are planning on setting up a tracking system so that we know how they're being used, where they're being used, and part of the tracking system will ensure that there is servicing capacity for these units as well in serviced areas. So yes, we will be tracking them, and by doing so, it'll help us to sort of realize our infill numbers as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't want us to have, in my worst case scenario, I see us having enough housing, 1,000, and then we throw in the ARUs and surprise, we're at 75,000, something like that. Okay, so appreciate tracking. Second question. I don't know who's doing that. On page 5 of the report, you talk about how you will likely face a shortage of commercial space in Paris and St. George. What is the best means of addressing that now? What should we be doing? Will we be, you think, addressing that potential shortage through the official plan, or is that one way, or is there other ways? What's the best way to address that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller, we actually have a standalone report coming from our consultant on commercial land needs analysis. So a draft of that's going to be coming in the fall. So what that's doing is looking at inventory, land use designations, and different options moving forward. And it all ties into all of our different employment pieces as well. Because what we're finding is that there's a lack of opportunities for a lot of small-based businesses, and just that we have certain restrictions on our commercial land use and our mixed-use land use designations. So we're looking at morphing them, especially in our settlement area boundaries and also in the rural, to allow opportunities just for different types of businesses to operate.
Okay. All right. So we look forward to that coming then. And then the final question, Mr. Mayor, on page 196, and that would be the Watson report. They state, and I'm going to read it, the county currently offers very minimal choice regarding shovel-ready employment sites. The county currently offers very minimal choice regarding shovel-ready employment sites to accommodate near industrial demand. And I know there's a few members around this committee that have said the same thing. I know I have. And maybe, I don't know if this is a question for you, Jennifer, or to maybe Michael, but who would we look to help us with that? I thought maybe strategic initiatives, but because this is, like I say, this is something I've had a concern with for a while, that we're not getting land ready. And the reason I'm asking that, well, obviously Watson pointed it out, but I think it's an issue. And I think, and the reason I'm saying that is so much manufacturing has gone on, is transferred overseas, whether it's Mexico or China or wherever. And I think this COVID-19 is going to, we don't know what the final outcome will be, but I think at the end of the day, supply lines are going to be shorter. So that's something I'm concerned about, and I'm just wondering who we would look to help us get around that. And I'll take an answer from anybody that has one to give. Thanks.
Michael?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I can, I think, address that question, or at least set council up for receiving that information. So Economic Development and Tourism has a report that they are just completing now. And in fact, I think it's in the final stage, which will outline current supply of shovel-ready land as well as shovel-ready land in the pipe. That would be municipally owned shovel-ready land, as well as lands that are privately owned and under development. So yeah, we are on that topic. It's contained in our strategic plan. And I think there's a concept, well, if the municipality would just build another business park, we would address that concern. And at staff level, we don't agree with that. We first of all think that it's a high risk, very expensive approach to delivering something that is better delivered with partnerships with the private sector. And there's lots of those partnerships evolving. And I think that report that council would be receiving, I would think early fall, again, my team is working on it now. So hopefully that addresses the question, and you'll get more information on that in the early fall.
Fair enough. Thank you, Michael.
Are there any other questions? The report? Seeing none, I'll give it back to Councillor Ferrier, please.
I believe I already spoke to this one and read the resolutions at the beginning.
All right, so there's no other questions, concerns? We're clear on what we're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Take this to 6B. It's the report on the update of the county zoning bylaw re-cannabis production processing. How's that? Councillor House, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor LaFerriere. The staff report RPT 20-101, update to county zoning bylaw re cannabis production and processing, be received as information.
Just receiving it as information. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we are looking at the zoning for cannabis production, I understand Hamilton has done a fairly good one. I don't know if you're looking at that one, but do you look to bring in two types of zonings? And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think, Matt, maybe you can answer this. Will we be looking at zoning maybe for the two different categories for registration? I think, which is recreational versus or maybe that's registration / medicinal, and certification versus recreational, or are we treating them all as just one?
It's 8 o'clock.
Ryan?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I think Matt would be the best one to answer, and he just stepped back in. Councilor Miller, if you could repeat and summarize your question for Matt.
Sure. Okay, very quickly then, Matt, through you, Mr. Mayor. For the zoning, are we looking at bringing in two different types of zoning, one for registration, one for certification, or would we just treat them all as the same?
Through the mayor to Councilor Miller, great question. Our zoning bylaw will be updated to treat them all the same. We're looking at implementing a cannabis production and processing use. So this would capture things like indoor and outdoor production.
Okay, I wish you, I see some challenges there because Health Canada currently says the medicinal guys, registration guys don't have to control for odor, but we can override that.
Yeah, through the mayor, the Cannabis Act allows us to implement our own municipal regulations, and that can be dealt with through a zoning bylaw and a site plan control bylaw. So we are proposing to do both.
Okay, I appreciate, it's ambitious and I appreciate that. My last question, can this bylaw be made retroactive to existing operators, or I'm not sure how that works, or can we give them, or do you give them 2 years, 3 years, whatever to get their act in order? Can this apply to existing operators?
Yeah.
Is there a method to do that?
Through the mayor to Councilor Miller, this would unfortunately, because this is a zoning bylaw, this could not be used retroactively. So this would be implemented for any new producers once it has been if it's approved and after the appeal period. There are other tools that can or could be used retroactively, but those may be things that we'll look at in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions to the report? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor to receive the report? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 7A, communications. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Pierce, that the County of Brant support the application of Flux Brewing Company for manufacturers limited by glass liquor sales license at 185 Oakland Road.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Are there any questions to the report? Seeing none, the report is clear. All those in favor to receive? Thank you. Opposed? Carried. 7B.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you a question?
I didn't miss you again, did I?
No, it's kind of hard. Were we just receiving that, or were we going to issue him a letter of support?
I thought it was to receive.
You're thinking of B.
No, it is a letter of support. I'm sorry. Thank you, Councillor Miller, for that.
Do we need a separate motion on that? That's all I'm wondering.
Heather, do we need a second one?
No, the motion that was read was to support the application, so a letter will go forward.
So we're okay?
Yeah, no, I heard you say receive, and then, but I thought, and I know there was more, but okay, well, that's fine.
Thank you. Council on Aging, Councillor Bell.
Yep. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gatwood, that the County of Brant supports the Grand River Council on Aging's application for an Ontario Seniors Community Grant, and that the Mayor forward a letter of support for inclusion in the application package.
Are there any questions to that? It's quite clear, I think. Councillor Feria?
Yeah, just if we touch base with them, they asked for it by today. I know it says the 5th on the third page of the letter, but it says the 4th. That is when they were putting their application in. So, I mean, can we do this post haste?
Yes. Heather, did you speak to Lucy about that?
Yeah, I've spoken to Lucy. They're putting their application in tomorrow, so I told her I would get it in the morning.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of my concern.
Thank you. Are there any other concerns for support of the Council on Aging? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution. Councillor Miller, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is a resolution from the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. And it's moved by myself, second by Councillor Wheat, that the resolution as outlined on the agenda supporting SWIFT as Southwestern Ontario's funding mechanism to advance the expansion of critical broadband infrastructure across Southwestern Ontario and requesting the Government of Canada and Province of Ontario to provide direct funding be approved.
Are there any questions to the report? Or to Councillor Miller? It's an exciting time. Councillor Atwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Miller. Yeah, it is. I'm pleased that SWIFT is moving forward, and I know that there's many areas in the county that receive poor service from the current providers of internet service. So will this replace our Brant Municipal Enterprises drive to supply internet and fiber optics to people in the county of Brant?
No. Oh, sorry. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, feel free to answer, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to interrupt, but I do have an answer because that's actually a really good question, Joe. And Brant Municipal Enterprises does not provide high-speed anything directly to consumers. They provide the backbone. That's where they make their money, selling it to, for lack of a better word, the retailers who sell it directly to consumers. So that's a business that Brant Municipal Enterprises decided to not get into because they don't have the back office staff to deal with, each individual customer, but they are good. They've already got the backbone, so that's what they're going to provide. So there's no competition with Brant Municipal Enterprises. In fact, if we could drive more high-speed retail, we'll actually bring business to Brant Municipal Enterprises.
Great, thank you very much for that clarification.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Takes us to number 9. There's no new business. Is there anything that anyone meant to put on other business or new business that didn't? Who wants to speak now? Seeing none, we're going to go in camera. Councillor Bell?
Yeah. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gatwood. The County of Brant Council convene in camera to discuss litigation matters affecting the municipality and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with the solicitor and Peter Tice, consultant in attendance, brackets Lasani St. George and Live Communities, close brackets, 620 Colburn Street, West, close brackets.
Thank you. Call the vote to go in camera. All those in favor? We're in camera. I want to roll the.
Okay, video's back on.
We're live again. Thank you. We go on to number 11, please. The bylaws. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Coleman. Just to note that bylaws 7720 and 7920 will be as amended because there were changes made at this meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by, I lost it.
Councillor McAlpine.
McAlpine. The
Yes.
bylaws be read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Second reading, please.
Hang on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor McAlpine. the bylaws be read a second time and all questions be preambled.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, seeing none. All those in favor, second reading? Third reading, please, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move by myself, second by Councillor McAlpine, that all bylaws be, the third reading of the bylaws be read, signed and sealed.
As amended.
As amended. As amended. Everyone's clear? All those in favor, third reading? Opposed? Carried. The next meeting. I want to talk to you people about we're not going to be meeting in person for the next council meeting. We're not quite ready yet. We've been working very hard. We're going to be doing a Zoom again for next week's meeting. We've talked about it today. I've talked about it with staff, and we're just not quite there yet. And so I hope no one's terribly disappointed. But we really do want to get this right when we get it. It's not as if any of our neighbors are doing anything any differently than we are, really. So we're just not going to be able to meet. So when we meet again next Tuesday, it will be another Zoom meeting. Are there any questions to that? Any concerns?
Move to adjourn.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.